All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening for what we hope will be a very interesting and informative program on the impact of COVID, impact of a pandemic on our school systems. This program is sponsored by the Cleveland Heights University Heights chapter of the League of Women Voters. I am Wendy During, and I am the chapter chair. This community cares a great deal about education and about our school district. We know that COVID-19 has thrown a monkey wrench into life for most all of us. The experience of these last few years has been a major challenge for our students and our educators. We hope to learn more about what it means from those who know it best, from our teachers and our counselors and our school leaders. We are also interested in knowing what you, the school representatives, would like the community to know about being an educator in the present school environment, what has changed and what is the same. So think along those lines. We are very grateful to all of you for coming here this evening and speaking. This program will be recorded and aired. So we may not have a large audience, but growing. But it will be viewed later by many people. All right, our panelists this evening. We have Ms. Elizabeth Kirby, who is our superintendent of schools. Dr. LaShonda Abdussatar, the director of social and emotional learning. We have Cassandra Budin, who is a teacher in the high school, math and engineering teacher at Heights High School, a 2001 graduate of the Heights school systems, and her two children attend Fairfax Elementary. We have Jeffrey Johnston, or Dr. J, who is the principal of Monticello Middle School. And we have Andrea Briggs, a kindergarten teacher at Canterbury Elementary, who graduated from Heights in 2002 and has three children, two at Noble Elementary and one at Monticello. So clearly supportive of and committed to the school district. So thank you for that. All right. Questions. If you in the audience have questions for them, we have a set planned program of questions, but at about 7:40 we will go over to public questions unless we've run out of conversation before 7:40. So if you have questions to ask, please, in true league fashion, raise your hand and somebody will run to you with a 3x5 card and a pencil, and we will collect the questions. We do have question screeners who will look through the questions to find what is most appropriate to rule out multiples of the same topic, clarify wording, things like that. But we will put questions to the panel. All right. Opening with Ms. Kirby, our superintendent. A timeline of COVID. Can you talk about when COVID was first upon us? And just harken back to an earlier time.
I remember I was in a first ring superintendent's meeting. So our district is a member of the first ring, which is about 17 districts that surround Cleveland. And the superintendent of Euclid was sharing something that he read that the governor was going to close schools, or there was an impending decision. And I remember thinking, oh, that's not good. This is a little overblown, right? And the next couple of days, that is exactly what happened. So I would say the day to remember is March 17th. That is when the state declared that all schools in the state would close due to COVID. And I remember at the time that we thought, this was like right around this time actually.
Mm-hmm. So a student I was just saying, they were like, it was 3 years ago, like today, that we were told we're going home for an early spring break.
Right.
And they were like, and I was like, yeah, you're right.
And that's what we thought it was going to week. We thought, okay, well, they'll have a couple more weeks. This will be kind of nice, you know. And then the news just got worse and worse and worse. And so as we started to see that we were in this for the long haul, the team at Central Office, the curriculum and instruction team, started to put together a platform so that we could provide instruction to students remotely. Brand new work for everyone, right? We had some resources already in place that we were using and really relied on that, but quickly tried to put something together to address that. Our district was lucky in that we already had the one-to-one Chromebooks. So the technology team worked to distribute those resources out to all of our families. But I will say, I mean, there hasn't been one aspect of this experience that hasn't been challenging, but there also hasn't been one aspect of this experience where I haven't been just incredibly inspired by everyone in the district and their work on this. So for our teachers to have to quickly move to a whole different mode of education, and in the spring of 2020, everyone was scared, right? So no one knew what was going to happen. It's hard to make, you know, good decisions when you're in a space like that. And then of course we had people that were experiencing the trauma and the tragedy of the pandemic as well. But we concluded our school year, that first year remote, and then when we came back in the fall, remember we began our planning in the summer, we thought, okay, well maybe this year is gonna be better. I remember thinking that we thought that everything was gonna be fine, and again, we're gonna be back in a regular structure, and then we started to see the rates in the county go up again. So then we had an intention in the fall of 2021 to start, you know, kind of in person. We quickly saw that we could not do that given where the county was. We were also still in that space of not being very clear on where we were with the science, what was safe and what was not safe as well. So we started the 2021 school year fully remote, with the exception of our students that have the most intensive and complex needs. And then by the second quarter, the second 9 weeks, we started to implement a hybrid model where students were, you know, taught. I remember in the elementary schools, you know, they would be released early and then have lunch at home. Then as we moved into the third quarter and the fourth quarter, we had 5 days a week of fully in-person instruction for elementary schools, and we had, at the end of the year, with a hybrid option for students in grades 6 to 12. And I just, from the perspective of the superintendent, everything was painful and hard. I will just say that. I don't think I got any good sleep at all, but I imagine for teachers and administrators similarly. And one of our board members is here tonight, and I remember we would always kind of have, all of our board meetings became about what's going to be our instructional model. What's the decision? You know, we had a reopening advisory committee. We were working with healthcare professionals, you know, looking at the science, kind of balancing everyone's needs. And I know that the year was probably extremely frustrating for parents and for teachers who wanted, you know, everyone wanted to know everything right away. And they wanted, and every decision, there were 50% of people on one side of the decision and 50% of people on the other side of the decision. And so we really tried to approach the work with, you know, a lot of deliberation and collaboration. But still, you know, it was really difficult. So then as we went into the 21-22 school year, we kept a virtual option for students, and we were pretty confident that, hey, pandemic is pretty much over. We'll at least be able to have school, you know, kind of regular school. But in that fall, if everyone recalls, then we got hit with Omicron. So lots of staff absences, lots of student absences, difficulties covering classes, lots of in and out, still lots of fear from parents, from staff members, and and the students were in masks, and so there was like the big mask thing, like they had to wear, mask. Are you mask optional? Are you like that was the whole thing districts were kind of trying to figure out. Then of course you have the politics of that coming into it, and so last year felt like we were still in the pandemic, even though the numbers were different, and the reporting and all that changed. So this year is the year where we are probably closest to what life was like pre-pandemic. But I will share that and I'm sure we'll talk about this today, we still see the effects of the pandemic in multiple ways. First of all, I think our society certainly is seeing that, but both academically, in terms of social emotional well-being for students and staff, we see that. I just want to share a couple data points that I was both working on a paper but also researching for this panel, so it was actually perfect timing. And I found this to be really interesting. So the Institute for Education Sciences has a school pulse survey, and they have a dashboard of a bunch of indicators, and they note how specifically what's happening on the ground with schools as it relates to the pandemic. So I'm just going to share 3 bullet points, but I think it does set some very important context to understanding what schools are still dealing with. So this is as of May of 2022. 80% of public schools indicated that they agreed that the COVID-19 pandemic negatively impacted the behavioral development of students at their schools. So 80%. So this is the end of last year. 85% of schools indicate, and I disaggregated so that it could be schools that demographically match our district, in case you go back and look this up. 85% of public schools agree that the COVID-19 pandemic negatively impacted the social emotional development of students at their school. And when we look at the percentage of students who have sought mental health services, 67% have noted an increase of students who have sought mental health services at their schools. So it's actually a really fascinating dashboard. There's quite a bit of data on that, but those particular data points, I think, are salient with our discussion this evening, and it certainly matches what we see in terms of some of our challenges, which I'm sure that the panel is going to be talking about.
Yes. Yeah, I remember back to March 2020 and marvel at how things turned out, contrary to what we were expecting. All right, to your point, Dr. Abdussatar and then the school representatives, now that we are moving past the pandemic and shutdown, what issues are you targeting? Have some kids been more impacted than others? And how do you work on recovery without putting more than normal pressure on the kids and on their teachers to perform? Dr. Abdussatar.
So I can start by saying that everyone has been impacted by the effects of the pandemic. So the pandemic did not discriminate. I believe that some of the things that we're working on are just the learning losses that were a result of that, and that's at all levels, K to 12, even though we didn't have the little ones in school. There was a learning loss there because of the impact of the pandemic at home for them. Also, the social emotional needs of the students, the data point that was just shared, we do notice that there's definitely an increase in the need for that social emotional learning and coping skills and how to interact with others because of maybe the shutdowns and probably being more in enclosed environments and scared to just go out and interact. And then we're also trying to make sure that we provide different supports to staff. We're being very conscious about the types of things that we do and the decisions that we make in order to provide that support in an intentional way, knowing that we do have some social emotional learning needs, we have mental health needs, and then we have some behavioral needs. And like Ms. Kirby shared, we do see that every day, and we know that that is a concern and definitely something that we want to work on all levels, K through 12 or pre-K through 12.
Okay. School teachers slash.
I guess, I mean, yeah, it impacts students differently. It impacts everybody differently, I think. You know, it depends on your personality. I'm someone who's pretty extroverted. I like to be around people. It's probably why I got into teaching. And so when I was told I have to go be in my house and not around people, that was difficult. For some of my students, they were thrilled. You know, they thrived in being able to be by themselves and learn online, but for others it was very difficult. When we went to the hybrid teaching, I mean, imagine trying to teach to people on a computer and people in a room behind a panel with masks on. I mean, it's like teaching in 4 different places at the same exact time. So yeah, that was very difficult. So, and I think that was probably the hardest part of the whole experience when we were starting to, and we were also kind of like trying to decide what to do with our own children. You know, do we send them back? Do we not? You know, there was that fear too. So,
Yeah.
yes, I think it was very different depending on the kid. And I think for me as a teacher, I've become just very empathetic. I try to talk to my students more, make sure they're doing okay. You know, having those personal, hey, how you doing kind of conversations, because, you know, every day is different how you're feeling about all that's happening with the pandemic and whatnot. So,
Is there more self-learning at the high school level that maybe helped some?
That's a good question. I think so since we had to kind of go more online, there's a lot, it's easier to access if you happen to need to be home for whatever reason, you get sick or whatever. They know how to, you know, go to Google Classroom and get their assignments, and so they're a little bit more independent in that way. Yes,
Yeah.
I do think that is the case.
Dr. J, middle school level?
So middle school is fun any day. So we all understand that, but I think the couple of things were real kind of learning experiences for us, and then also some challenges. One of the things that we learned through this process was a lot about our families in terms of their own occupations, their own challenges. So if you have a lot of parents who work nights, and then you're having students who are trying to attend, you know, virtually online, those parents, that's a struggle, because now their child is home, whereas they're used to them being at work. And so some of those hardships became, you know, even more prevalent in our situation for sure. And then, you know, one of the things that jumped out at us was I get concerned about screen time any day of the week, and through, you know, no choice of our own, our kids were now in front of their screens constantly, and there was fatigue for our staff. You know, if you think about the teaching day, so the teaching day, as the kids were following their normal schedule, so the teachers were constantly moving through those screens and engaging kids, and it was exhausting. You know, they didn't have the opportunity to do some of that informal, you know, conversation with kids where they got to know them a little bit, and it takes some of the pressure off of what's happening in the class. It's just that notion of just checking in with the student in that proximity. And that was a huge challenge. So, you know, the learning fatigue, the screen fatigue over time was a real challenge for our students for sure. And I'll just share one funny anecdote. We were working with our staff on really trying to figure out ways to keep the kids engaged, because the reality is that they could just click off, right? So we have a randomizer where, you randomize the names in the class and you call on the students, because everybody has to be ready, right? Works really well in person. And we had some teachers who, they would randomize, they would click on that student's name and whoop, that student was gone the second their name came up.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was very easy for them to check out. And I think that was a big challenge, was really trying to maintain that engagement. I just have to hand it to our staff and their efforts to maintain that throughout, because it was very easy to not be engaged, very easy not to log on. And for some of the high school students, they have a little bit different motivation at times because it's credit driven, it's graduation driven. There are certain things they have to accomplish, and for some of our students making that transition to middle school, they didn't have that external piece. And so, just combining all those things together, and it was at times a very trying time educationally. What I will say though is our staff became so adept at technology, and they grew leaps and bounds.
Whether they wanted to or not.
Whether they wanted to or not. Leaps and bounds. The district provided a ton of resource, different ways that kids can respond, different ways that you can engage kids. So there was a real professional learning that took place throughout. And we definitely see that continuing as we come back to a more traditional setting.
And Andrea?
Can I also add something
Sure.
about, because you were talking about screen fatigue, and there's also the opposite effect, because when my high schoolers went home, and I was just talking to one of my students today about it, when they were sent home initially, and they were like, and some of their parents were saying, you can't go anywhere, you're stuck in the house, their phone was their connection to the outside world. TikTok blew up, Instagram blew up, and they got used to that. And now it's a problem because it is impossible to pull them away from their phones. And this is really one of, if you talk to at least the high school teachers,
Sure.
this is one of our biggest issue, is getting them off the phone. And if we can come up with some kind of universal district-wide cell phone policy or some kind of solution, it'll be the best day of our high school staff's lives.
Yeah.
Are teachers allowed to have students put their cell phones in a basket or something and collect them?
So
Are we allowed? I mean, yes. Do we want to do that? No. I have never seen students actually react so strongly to having their phone taken from them. I mean, it is an emotional attachment. I have taken a phone from a student and had them actually physically shaking because they don't have their phone near them.
Wow.
So it's a challenge. You don't want to make them so uncomfortable that they can't do anything in class.
Yeah.
So
Andrea, TikTok and Instagram in kindergarten?
Oh, well, they have their ways. I will say, I think that is something that, though, some families have expressed concern with, though, is the access that we have given young kids to technology, especially like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders who have to bring their devices home. If their family doesn't really allow, the access to YouTube, because they're not doing as much TikTok, but they get the YouTube feed videos, which is basically TikTok, I've discovered. That we've kind of put that in their hands and now in their homes. And so then the parents are having to have more fights with the kids about it's time to get off, or I thought you were doing this, but really you're doing that. So I think that is something that we've seen. There were a couple things that got brought up that I was thinking about. One of them was that piece of you got to see what was at home or just what people's lives were like at home. And I think, sometimes when we think about who was impacted, we don't always think about working parents as people who would struggle during a time like that. But with that decision of what do I do with my kids, the kids who are in daycares really struggled during the pandemic because you know, we had kids who were at home with their parents right next to them, signing them on and helping them get situated. And we've got, you know, your paper set out. And I happened to, my son was in kindergarten during the 2021 year, and so I was lucky he was a reader, so I could just set his papers out in the morning and say, log in. He was typing in the chat to his teacher, and I'm like, what are you doing? But I was upstairs teaching virtually all morning, and I did not have other options for my kids and what they were doing, and so they really were kind of ignored for the first.
So kindergarten was also taught virtually?
Yes, yes. And so, it's funny, so that was another thing I was going to talk about, was I did feel like, especially when we first went remote, that I did have an opportunity to connect with families and kids in a way that I don't get to in the classroom, especially with families. But, you know, when you're, especially in kindergarten, you don't get as many opportunities to just sit with one kiddo and talk with them and hang out, because you also have to figure out what are the other 24 kids doing, and you know, they all want to talk to you, they all want to, you know, so I felt like it was nice that like everybody else, we had like, I set up like appointments with my kids, and so I could just chat with them, and they wanted to show me things in their house, and so I felt like there was some nice connection that happened that I had never really experienced before. But there were many other things that I would not trade that for at all. So that was one thing. And then I think coming back, some of the things, especially this year, we all kind of thought like, okay, we've done that, they're back, it's fine, we're ready, these kids are going to be ready. And then it was like, oh wait, these kids were 2 when the pandemic happened. Like they were at their developmental age and they were at home, or they were, you know, behind a mask. And so we have a lot of speech and language issues, so a lot of articulation, and I think it was just, they didn't see mouths, and, you know, so things like that, where it's like we're having to figure out, oh, we've got lots of kids who need services, not necessarily an IEP, but they need more support with being able to understand them. We've got like potty training things that we just really haven't seen before in kindergarten have definitely shown up this year. And so, and that, I think that's, the kindergarten teachers in the district are pretty close. So I think across the board, we're like, what is this? What's that? You know, like we're seeing lots of things that we just really haven't seen. And that piece of like, you know, they have been kind of entertained by technology for a great deal of the last few years, and then we're coming back into the classroom, and we are trying our best to put a lot of that away and get back to more of like, you know, we're going to play with each other, we're going to interact, it's time for sitting and learning, we're using our pencils, and that is, you know, that's not what they've been doing the last few years. And so there's some almost like that you're taking my phone away situation. It's like, or I just want to play, you know, I haven't been in a preschool setting, so.
A friend of mine's child was in kindergarten, and her very favorite part of the day was wriggle time. She excelled at wriggle time, not so good with the actual instructional part, but.
And then there's the whole keeping kindergartners away from each other during a pandemic, which is not possible. It was like I remember when we first came back and the shields were a thing, and I remember like, it was funny because it was so quiet and they just were not used to talking to anybody, and we were like, you guys can talk. Okay. And now we're like, where are the shields? Back up.
Right.
But yeah.
All right. Again, for Dr. Abdussatar and the school representatives, since Dr. J is not a teacher, I'm now stuck. I can't just say the teachers. Former teacher?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, always a teacher.
All right. How has the classroom changed, and how has it stayed the same? What was lost and what can be restored? What are the most important and effective ways that you are addressing learning loss, and how is the district addressing the social and emotional needs of the students?
I have to say that this year, it feels very much like we didn't change much. And some of that is, it's kind of like a little bit disappointing, because it's like, we didn't maybe learn anything that we could have done a little bit differently. I mean, some meetings are virtual, which is kind of nice. We're able to do like IEP meetings virtually, which is a lot easier, I think, on parents. And we've kind of discovered some of that stuff, but I do feel like there's certain things maybe that we could have learned about and maybe thought about, okay, does this actually fit in the everyday? I do think that we've continued to use a lot of the technology pieces that we've learned about. I know like my own curriculum classroom stuff is all very accessible, no matter if you have to be away from the class or not. So that's kind of nice. But
I think I was going to say the opposite. I think that a lot of what we learned during what happened during the pandemic created a lot of learning opportunities and a lot of opportunity for growth, and even just the technology piece of how we use technology within the classroom is a little bit different than how we were using it before. So I think we progressed positively in some ways, but then I do also see that maybe some things can be a little different. But then that's a growing process as well, and you don't want to jump into it. Now we can do it with a little bit more intentionality and not be as forced as we were during the COVID times. And just the creation of my position here. And this is the Director of Social Emotional Learning. That position or that title is a new kind of thing. They don't have that in a lot of other districts. So just the adoption of this position and the understanding that we do have some social emotional needs that need to be addressed. How can we organize, our district and some efforts in that way to be able to do that? I think it's very inspiring.
yeah, I mean, I do agree with you there. Like there has been advances technology-wise, social emotional, but if I'm thinking about my own classroom, like the structure of our classes hasn't changed. I still have very large classes, which is kind of like we're coming out of this pandemic where we're like, let's not try to be so close to people, and I have a class of 30 students in a fairly small room. It just doesn't feel like much has changed structurally and like that's a hard thing to change. So I understand that, but like the way that my classes have been structured and it just seems very pre-pandemic, kind of exactly how, business as usual.
I agree, I like the access, especially for like kids who are sick, like the families can do homework at home and they don't fall so far behind as they used to. But especially this year, the structure of like the classrooms, we also have really big classes, or we have, we're trying to do, the format, we do small groups, we do circle time, we do like a lot of the things that we have done in the past. I will say, like, it seems to me, and this is partly my screen immersion too, but I do think like our upper grades at the elementary level are on technology more in the classroom than I would love. But I know that, they are typing papers and doing a lot more things, but I would, I think that there's other parts of their day that should look more authentically elementary-like. But I think because we created so much stuff during the pandemic virtually and that they could access, it was like, I created some good stuff. I'm like, man, I remember that. That was a good one. But you're trying to think about, but it was, you created a lot of these things that I think people want to use. So I get why, but that part.
I think one of the things that we've really grasped onto is we did a couple things with our schedule to try to extend some instructional time for our kids, because we knew that having a little bit more time for the staff to work with the students and less transitions during the day would be beneficial to them. So that's something that we wanted to work on, as well as providing intervention and advisory time, which is very important for middle school students to have that opportunity to just interact in a way that is not always necessarily tied to an academic subject, just the notion of being together. We are constantly looking for ways to get our students into the community, and whether it be a field trip or whether it be an experience in the community, going to elementary schools and representing our school in that elementary school, just giving them chances to interact with, because they really lost that for a couple of years, and that is so important. And so when we talk about the social emotional side, they have to learn how to navigate conflict. And if they're navigating conflict virtually, or they're navigating conflict through their phone, or they're navigating conflict through social media, that is not an effective way to navigate conflict. And the more that we can create opportunities for kids to be together in positive ways, so that's your clubs, that's your activities, that's your incentives, those kinds of things, that becomes even more important, I think, now. So when we talk about structural things, where is that opportunity in the day? Where are those opportunities in the year to create those opportunities, chances for kids to be out? In many ways, if I ask many of you what you remember about your school experience, a lot of you are going to talk about, not necessarily going to talk about math, right? You're going to talk about, no offense, you're going to talk about the experiences, you're going to talk about the experiences or the friendships or the social sets, crucially important. And the kids just lost a lot of that. So we've had a chance this year to do more of that, and I'm sure we could do more than we are doing. But it's something that I think builds positive culture in the building, builds positive culture in the community. One thing I wanted to mention, one of the challenges, not so much this year, but in the previous year when we were coming back into the schools, we also had to monitor close contact, and there's this whole notion of contact tracing. So if you had a student who you learned had tested positive for COVID, you then had to go through their classes and check on each one of their classes in proximity and who was there that day and who sits next to them. And then there was a process of parent notification and a process of them spending time, with me, waiting for their parents to pick them up. So it's all disruption, right? It's all disruption of family lives. It's all disruption of their school life. And we had a few students who they got impacted by that multiple times, and they were understandably not happy, and their parents were not happy. But we were following the guidelines, and I think the district was very strong in adhering to the guidelines that were presented by the medical experts. And our charge was to implement that to the best of our ability. So it's great to have that on the, hopefully behind us, because it does give us an opportunity to have our kids more with us and look for those clubs and those activities and try and get them connected to school. I think that's become extremely important for this generation of students, for sure.
And that importance of connecting off of technology, and what better place to do it than at school.
Right.
I will say one other thing what looks different is we do have title support in kindergarten level this year, so we do have a reading specialist who comes in and works with our students. But that definitely has tied up the day to have, I have this structured time where I have another adult coming in, and it makes the rest of the day less flexible for things like playtime or our IB lessons or things that we were gonna do. So I think that finding that balance between what was the academic loss and how do we help kids catch up with also what was the social loss and what other losses really still stand in the way of the academics. mathematics. We spend a lot of time trying to think about, you know, we've got to learn this and we have to catch the math, but they're missing so many other pieces too that we have to think about and be really aware of what the kids need apart from the academics. Or in addition to. No, in addition to.
Yeah. I just want to add one thing. One thing that the district has done as well is they've added through funding that came as a result of COVID, academic support, success tutors, and success coaches, and particularly for Monticello, you know, we had a wonderful success coach who was a male who is now at the high school who made sense as a coach, made sense for him to make that change. But then we were able to add a young lady who came into us, and really that role is a social emotional role. I mean, they partner with our counselors. They work very hard with any potential conflict or friendship or mediation or anything. So it's, you know, their role is a social emotional role, and I think that was a recognition by the district that was a need that our student population had coming off of the last 2 or 3 years. So that's definitely been a positive.
And then I'll just add one more piece. I think that has been, coming back off of COVID, has been this push-pull for many districts, including us, of that getting back to the basics. And that was a model probably a lot of districts kind of adopted. So trying to go back to what we knew, how education is supposed to be, along with incorporating some of these new pieces, but then also filling in the gaps. So we do have, you know, our success tutors. We have, you know, the success coaches that work with the counselors. We have different partnerships with other agencies to try to fill that mental, you know, health need or support need. But then even other partnerships that work on bringing kids together in groups. And, you know, we have the partnerships with the art, you know, organization of bringing kids together and working in collaborative environments to hopefully, you know, teach those social skills or have them understand how to resolve conflicts and interact with others. So we're doing a lot of different things and looking at it through different lenses that kind of really helps us.
To answer the question about what is the most important, memorable thing, it's marching band and lunchtime. So glad I could answer that for you.
So not math.
Math teacher, but not in a good way. So we won't go there. Yeah. All right. Ms. Kirby and Dr. Abdussatar, the federal government has provided our district a remarkable $17.1 million to help with recovery. Can you talk about what mandates exist for the use of those funds and how the district is using that money?
We did receive $17.1 million. The mandate is, I believe, 20% for academic recovery. But we're using about 2/3 of that amount for academic recovery, social emotional recovery as well. So folks will talk a bit about some of those things. We've hired additional social workers, additional teachers, additional paraprofessionals. We've run Tiger Camp for the past 3 summers. That first summer actually was really important just to get kids around each other.
What is Tiger Camp?
Tiger Camp is a summer program for students, grades K to 8. And in the first summer, you know, we had 400 or so students, and just an opportunity for academic enrichment, but also the social emotional piece. And that the first summer was the summer of 21, and I just remember parents saying, please take my child. Just because they're, you know, they may have had a student, I know there's one, her daughter had been remote all year, and she was just like, she needs this, I need this. And it was just a really important, you know, opportunity for kids to reconnect and to learn how to be social, you know. So we have, so additional deans of students, we have partnerships, as Dr. Abdussatar. I will tell you, I don't believe in giving not one dime back of any kind of funding. So we are watching, monitoring, making adjustments, hoping for some additional money even. But yeah, the vast majority of that was spent, the success tutors are a big piece for this year, has been spent on the academic and social emotional recovery for the students. I think one thing that we heard, because as we developed the budget, you know, we were talking with different stakeholders, surveying staff, surveying families. We heard that those were the top two things people wanted the support for, so we definitely aligned our spending to that.
When was the funding received, and is it for a stipulated period of time?
Yeah, so we received, it goes through 2024, so the September of 2024 is going to be the end of it. We received those funds, I believe it was the summer right before Tiger Camp, because that's how we were able to do that big expansion when we got those funds. I think spring 21 or January, something like that. Yeah.
So the supports that you've been able to add are time limited at this point?
Mm-hmm. They are.
What are you seeing from the programs that are most effective? What progress are you seeing because of these added programs?
Well, I would say not only for the added programs, but like the incredible work of the teachers and the administrators. When we look at the performance on last year's OSTs, every content area grew. Elementary schools in particular, very big jumps, almost some surpassing performance pre-pandemic actually, or very close to that. And so we have we've seen just kind of growth in that concentrated effort. This is our first year with the expanded kind of tutorial program. So, you know, we're looking to see what that impact is. We also have seen declines in infractions as well for students. And we have seen improvements in attendance as well. So there's still some things we have to work on, so you know, full disclosure, but you know, kind of those are the major indicators that we tend to look at. So we've seen improvements, and I think it's everyone's collective work. Let me just tell you, I was in a kindergarten class yesterday. Ms. Briggs.
Was it wonderful?
It was. Every time, it doesn't matter what level classroom I'm in, I just want to hear, what do you need me to do? Like, and so the kids were in nap time, right? Which I just love the nap time. And then a little girl comes up, you probably know this, comes up to the poop room, right? So teacher points.
At least she covered it.
Yep. She points to the garbage can, she goes, you know, vomits. You know, the teacher's like, I saw you. What do you want me to do? Kids alert, you know. She's like, I got it, don't worry about it. You know, she's like, this is my lovely, you know, glamorous life. And I saw her like 15 minutes later. She's like, yeah, someone else peed in their pants. What is it? You know, we're just like, I was like, this is, my goodness.
That's a lot. We actually had a parent tour. So the parents were there. They had the little one there, and I had one who got sick. And the parent, I could never seen anybody leave a kindergarten class that fast.
Yeah.
And the kids scattered, and I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Everybody take a breath.
But I say that to say that, like, I just so appreciated how teachers, in the midst of all this, stayed committed, jumped in, did the work, dealt with the ups and the downs of the school day, and the unpredictability of kind of what all this looks like too as well, you know. So it's been, we're really blessed just to have the leaders we have in the buildings and the teachers that we have in our buildings and the staff we have in central office, because there is a collective kind of push towards, we're going to figure this out together. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes, okay, so I just want to add that I just want to say kudos to the schools for using all of the resources that we have initiated or have began, because it's difficult when you're used to operating one way and now you have basically a lot of bodies you know, what to do with these bodies, how do we provide support, how are we going to be strategic and what we focus on. So they've done a great job at really being strategic about what they focus on so that we can see those results in the end and we can see those benefits.
I kind of also want to, like you've said a lot about, kudos to all the staff and all that. I also want to say it to the students. I mean, this was difficult for everyone, but for the students, I think it was particularly difficult. And I know, at least for me, my students were the ones that sometimes were like, hey, what if we did this online? Or what if we did this when we're in the classroom? And I was like, okay, yeah, let's give it a try. I mean, all this is new, so whatever. And I have seniors this year who basically their whole high school career right now has been just insane. And they were just saying today, they were like, we're just going to make this the best senior year of all senior years. And, we have to fit all of our 4 years into this 1 year. And so I think resilience comes to mind. Our students have been very resilient. For this part.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to say one thing. I love what Dr. J's, what do you most remember? I remember in elementary school something called Play Day. And I love school, by the way, but I remember Play Day, which was the end of the year. We'd go to Forest Hills Park and have a whole day and it was a student in the high school last year who suggested to the team that they bring back field day, right? So they ended up doing a field day here last spring because the students said, we need, we missed our field day, we need this, right? And they had a really great time, the bouncy, and all of that. So, yeah, you definitely have to continue to remember that, but I just
It's always great when you see high schoolers acting like kids.
Yeah.
I had a group at the Magnet Institute, and I don't know if anyone's been there, but there's a huge playground there, which is an incredible playground. If you want to go play and be a kid, go there. As an adult, you can play on the playground. And these kids saw that playground. I mean, we had a great program all day long, and then we were like, can we play on the playground? It's like, yeah, you can play on the playground. And to watch these kids run out, high school, seniors, I mean, it's awesome.
Do they have teeter-totters?
They do. I got on one.
Oh, man. I am there tomorrow. The question that I have here is, what are the long-term prospects for recovering? How long do you think this will take? Or do you think the impact is going to be very long-term on the kids?
That's a good question.
That's hard to say for kids. I mean, I think it's going to impact school forever. I think we're always going to be thinking about this stuff. We have created a lot of things and learned along the way, and know that if we have to pivot for whatever reason, we can do it. It's going to be hard, but and I think maybe for the students as well. I mean, they've learned a lot about readjusting and figuring out creative ways to do things. So I can't imagine, I mean, negative and positive, I think it's going to impact all of us for the rest of our lives. I can't imagine it can't.
It has been very encouraging to see the results of for a lot of our students academically last year and then this year, and hopefully we'll continue that. There's definitely been growth, and depends on how you measure the gap in terms of where they could have been, but we see, and every day we see our students doing better, and we just encourage them to think about what we talk about in Monticello a lot is reaching your own full potential, your individual full potential. It's not a race against anybody else. It's what you can achieve yourself, and encouraging them to take that seriously. And when you have targets in front of them, or you have goals in front of them, and they reach that goal, that is a big milestone for them. And we're seeing more and more of that, and that was hard to assess when they weren't in front of you, and the challenge was significant in terms of the barriers that they were facing. But we are definitely seeing more success, more growth from our students, and that's very encouraging. So, you know, how you measure that in relationship long-term, there's a few different ways to do that, but just what we see every day and what the kids are accomplishing. And, you know, the great thing about middle school is the student who's in 6th grade and then that student in 8th grade, like those two years feel like 20 in terms of how they change. And so seeing many of our 8th graders who've gone through this really crazy experience, you can see that growth with them. And so I'm very encouraged by what all schools are able to accomplish, and what, and I think the point is really well made, what the kids are able to accomplish. You know, they'll look back on this, and at some point they're going to say to themselves, I can overcome this challenge because I remember when we had to overcome this. And so I feel very encouraged about the future.
Andrea, yeah, from the kindergarten, because those are such fundamental core life skills that you get at that age.
Yeah. I think at the beginning, it felt like there wasn't much difference when the kids were coming back, because we always get kids who've never been to preschool, or we always get like a very big range of, you've got kids who are reading, you've got kids who've never seen a letter, and so like you get this big range anyway. But I think it's like one of those, like, only time will tell, because each year I feel like we were like, oh yeah, this is gonna be okay. They're gonna be just like they were when they came in, you know, before this, and then they come in and we're like, okay, no, that wasn't, you know, readjust. So I think only time will tell. I think, Ms. Kirby, you asked me this earlier this year, like, how much more time, like, how many, because we call it, like, you know, the COVID kids, almost. It's like the kids that came in, they've been the most impacted by COVID, and it was like, you know, we thought that last year was going to be that group of kids, and last year was kind of like, oh, this is okay, and then, so each year it feels a little different. But I think that's true, and I think the world is changing, the world will continue to change, and so, like, sometimes I ask myself, like, what are we getting back to? If things keep changing, shouldn't we keep changing too? What are we trying to get back to? And is that even a place we want to go back to? I think kids teach you that with technology too, like the things that they can do. I'm like, what? How did you swipe on that? What? Do it again. You know, like they're changing and evolving, and I think that that's something that we have to continue to do too.
I think that's a great point. And I just thinking about some of my own students where they've said stuff like, oh, well, during the pandemic, I started my own baking company on Instagram, and now look at my site. And it's like a professional bakery on Instagram. And I'm like, you're doing it. Like, wow. So yeah, that's a really good point.
It might be interesting over the coming 12 years to see the progression of kids who were impacted by COVID at different ages. And I assume there will be shifts over time, that the 12th grade teacher will have different experiences with the kids who were just in it versus the kids who were in it at kindergarten.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it happens anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you think about year to year, the group of kids, it's different. It doesn't matter if pandemic or not. You've got a different group of kids, and you're different personalities and different interests. So it's hard to say, you know, and like you were saying, there's so much other stuff going on too. We have to think about, not only was there a pandemic going on, but there were 17 other huge world issues that were happening and impacting our kids. And so it's hard to say, you know, where does the pandemic stop and like a social justice issue start? So, I mean, it's hard to say, you know, what is what, but there was a lot of creativity, I'll say that.
There have been references to it, but if you could speak in a little more detail about how the district is investing in our teachers to make the teachers' lives better.
Better at school. I mean, I wish we could have that.
Sure,
Yeah.
new car for every teacher, yeah.
That'd be good, that'd be great.
Well, I would say one thing that, one of the reasons that we made the social emotional investments for the students is not only because we know that they would need it, but because we also know that it could be a support for teachers in the classroom if there is someone a student can go talk to. There is, you know, a licensed clinical therapist, you know, within the school who could address some of those needs that are obstacles for teachers. We also did things like professional development for teachers. Each of the schools have a trauma-informed action plan. I remember that first, I don't know if it was like the 2021 year, kind of coming back, where we wanted to make sure that social workers are leading teachers through a process where they can kind of just think about what their own needs were as it relates to their own social emotional health. We were very intentional around involving teachers in the planning during the pandemic. So, for example, our assistant superintendent over Ed Services frequently met with all grade level teachers, especially in the elementary school. I think it was a little easier there, to get their feedback on needs, concerns, what the model should be, what adjustments need to be made.
Please take it to the back.
We also continue to invest in professional development for teachers, so everything from avid professional development. You know, we have a science of reading series that teachers are going through now. We added some additional planning time for teachers. I wish we could have actually added more, so that they just had a chance to catch their breath and do planning. And though we did all those things, I think there's more to do. And it's interesting, I was even looking at some data on this in schools, right? And when you look at the, like this national data pool, the number of students who are served in terms of their mental health needs, it's in the 60% plus. For teachers, lower, a much lower amount. Now, part of that is, I don't necessarily think teachers are going to be going to a school district to get their, clinical counseling needs met, and that stuff tends to be private anyway. But we don't have, someone on the ground who can be in our district to provide like deep emotional support, for teachers. So I think we're still trying to get a sense of what that support does look like. I always think, to me, it's time. But I also think it's things like making sure teachers are continuously supported around supporting our kids, because, they are receiving a lot of the trauma, right? So like the trauma that kids are experiencing, I believe teachers are experiencing secondary trauma. And we all have been through this collective challenging moment that I know that teachers have been picking up a lot of things from the students that they work with, because that, it just happens that way. So those are some of the things we've been doing. I would say the SEL support for the kids to give the teacher some relief, and then the professional development support. And, we added additional, data planning time with those kinds of things as well. Our second year of COVID, we did the 21 year, we did a lot of virtual learning, which also provided, feedback. I've heard from teachers, I don't want to speak for teachers, that was helpful. We moved away from that though, because we found that both, teachers and administrators are kind of missing having that face-to-face experience with their colleagues. So even though virtual was easier, building the community that we still needed to build in the schools was not as easy in virtual environments. So yeah, so those are some of them.
Thank you. Did you have a comment to make, or you're just smiling in agreement? Okay.
Yeah, smiling agreement, for the most part. Some things can be virtual still. I'm just gonna say that.
Well, you know, and it's, yeah, that's the, you know, that's the beauty.
I agree with you, I like being around my colleagues.
Yeah.
I said I was extroverted, but there are certain things that I think could remain virtual and be very welcome to the teachers.
Just a reminder to our audience, if you have a question you would like to be presented, please raise your hand and someone will bring you a card, and then pick up the card. Turn around, somebody's behind you. Oh, she's giving out cards.
To,
Oh, sorry.
Some of the things that
Sure.
administrators at least have done that's been nice for teachers is start to take some things off of our plate. And if this could happen more, this would be great, but just this year, the administrators decided to kind of take on the tardies. So we didn't end up having to sit there and document and count up the tardies, we just marked it, and now they're taking care of it. I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but just anything that you can take off of a teacher's plate is very impactful on their day-to-day. Okay, now I can put all of that attention to my students, you know, so it was nice. So that is one positive thing
Good.
that happened this year.
Yay. All right. Equity is a driving focus for our school district. Can you talk about the effects of COVID on equity?
Well, I think when you look at the data, you still see the gaps, and they have widened across those academic metrics. This year we have started a pretty comprehensive partnership with Integrated Comprehensive Systems for Equity. So now our building leadership teams are being trained to deliver equity professional learning to teachers in the building. And so it's a model where, you know, teachers and staff are teaching each other and are really taking ownership of that work. And so that's what we've been doing in response to those continued gaps. But I would say I definitely worry about the impact over time that the pandemic will have, specifically in our students who have been the most marginalized. So though we do have, I think we're taking the most aggressive steps we've taken around the equity work, again, there's still some things that we'll have to really be strategic about, especially as relates to funds that will not be available, you know, in a year and 3 months.
Okay, anyone? And in spite of having 2 years of interrupted learning, the state continues to require testing and has not removed the requirement for third graders to pass the reading skills test before advancing to fourth grade. Does this make sense to you? And how is our district navigating testing in this era of recovery?
I would say the third, I don't understand the third grade reading guarantee, the retention and the score and all of that. That definitely doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, you understand what it is, but in terms of a practice, it doesn't make sense.
Just because retention doesn't help kids, so generally, as you know, as a practice. I think it's important to know where students are from a state proficiency perspective. I will say that the way that the state does that is not something that aligns with my philosophical beliefs. So I do believe you want to know if kids are proficient. I do. I think that's important. But the history of the state in terms of using that in punitive ways to dismantle public education is unfortunate and will have a detrimental impact long-term in our state and in our country. And so I know that the state of Ohio wants to attract people to the state. The way that public schools are treated does not make this a friendly place to live. And there are many implications for that, even beyond the school, in terms of the vitality of the communities, which contribute to people wanting to move here or wanting to stay here. And it was the year that even last year there was kind of a bit of less test pressure because they didn't grade or score the test, whatever that is. And then, the year before, this place, that has been used as a weapon, and that weapon is not going to be, abandoned in our state, unfortunately. And all of these things connect. All of this connects with vouchers, it connects with state funding, it connects with all the tax conversation. It's all connected. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't serve schools well. You can look at, in the state of Florida, when they started grading schools, a direct impact in the neighborhoods. And all of this was on purpose, right? This was all on purpose. So I just, and that's my answer.
It's all right.
And I think some of the things, like some of the smaller layers that go into that also, like, I think you asked earlier about like the pressure put on students and the pressure put on teachers and things like that, but it's like there's all of these like benchmarks that we are required to meet, or that students are required to meet, or whatever, but that creates this like all of these layers of pressure that don't always honor that social emotional piece, or they don't honor what you're doing. And I'm gonna be a little negative here for a minute, but there's this huge attendance pressure going on right now, and I get it, and I want students in my classroom, and I know the importance, but you also have students who are ill and sick, and when the families get this letter with this red donut, and I'm like, I got my kid home because they were really sick, but I feel like I'm being yelled at because I could, or I do send them when it's questionable, and then I get a call like, you shouldn't have sent them today, and I'm like, I know, but I'm getting yelled at by this donut. It's like, it's all of these little pressures, and I feel like I haven't done a good job as a mom making those calls, and I know that lots of our families at our school are even like, what is this? What does this mean? And I'm like, it's okay, it's all right. But, those little subtle things that we feel like we're doing to motivate and to, to meet our benchmarks are creating lots of pressure for kids, for families, for things. And not intentionally, but how do we have a better balance of like, yes, we know that like we want to get here, these are like our goals, but like we also honor what's going on in families. What else is happening? It's like, right, I think of like, we have a family who they were out because a family member did just die of COVID, and so it was like, but then they got this letter, and it's like,
no, they can opt out.
I know, and that's what I said. You can opt out, whatever, so you can do that, but it is that initial like feeling of like, what did I do, or that and I think a lot of our families are those like, they want the best, like they want to do well for their students, so like I can feel that pressure too. That I don't think we need to create.
It's a good point, because I think as superintendent, I am always looking at the metrics, right? Like, and I'm also thinking about, at the end of the day, we want all of our students, all of our graduates to graduate and be free. So what do I mean by free? By that I mean, we want kids to be able to choose the pathway they want to take. We want them to be prepared for all of them. They choose to go to four-year college, prepared. Two-year college, prepared. Skilled trades, prepared. Military, prepared. Volunteer, travel the world, prepared. But we want them to be able to choose, right? Because that's freedom. And so that means that we have to really think strategically from K to 12 after COVID, how to make sure that we're giving them what they need so they can be free by the time they're graduating. Because this is our promise to families, and it's our promise to the community. And I know, but then when it gets to the individual, it feels different, right? So like, I'm at the whatever feet, 30 feet high, kind of like 30,000 feet, trying to, okay, so you need to this and this, okay, and all of that. But I know that, it feels, because actually, someone on my team is a parent and has said, my child's missed a lot too. She's just been really sick. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yep, right. So, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I know that's happened, that's real. But then also, we also know that those patterns of attendance are set in the primary years, and it tends to kind of continue. So it's actually the best time to, if you want to kind of impact and make sure kids have strong patterns of attendance, it's, the primary. And in a regular year, not, again, not so much, but again, and I know we have a lot of sickness, and there's always something new that's kind of happening too. So that's kind of like, I'd say that's the beauty of the work, right? Because you're trying to manage kind of all those pieces and to kind of figure out the right tweak. But that's why it is important to have, it's important to hear kind of what though does it really look like on the ground and what you have to pay attention to. And now, what's great about our parents is, because trust me, I heard about those letters. And so it's good, right? So it's good, but that feedback is important too, because you want to keep all of those kind of perspectives and experiences in mind. Yep.
And the other illnesses are like really major. I mean, my own children have been really sick, but kindergartners this year, I mean, I think across the board, we almost always have the worst attendance in the building. But you think about, like, they either were masked during most of their, critical immune building system moments, or they were at home with their core group. And so many, I mean, I've had kids after kids, it's like week 1 fever, good for 3 days. Week 2, stomach virus, good for 3 days. Week 3, like it really had, and I feel awful that that the kids have been so sick, but I think back to my first year teaching, that was me. I had so many sicknesses, and so I was like, okay, I've seen it all, just fine, but the kids have been sick this year. Kindergartners in particular.
So back to the question that I laid out at the beginning of this. What would you like the community to know about being an educator in the present school environment? What has changed? What is the same? What can the community do to help you?
I'm going to say that our kids are great kids, and I think it's our families are great families. And I don't mean that to be kind of a throwaway statement. I mean, they really are tremendous kids who are focused on doing better and focused on improving. And when you have those conversations with them, they do want to represent themselves and their families well. And we operate in a state that has an assessment process, and it has scores for our schools and those kinds of things. And what we understand is that we have to show the performance on that, and we have to show and demonstrate what our kids are capable of doing. And part of that is really, one, believing in them. So we truly appreciate when our community believes in our kids and believes what they can accomplish, believes in our staff, believes in what the district is working to accomplish. Because it does make a difference, because what it leads to is opportunities for our kids, and what it leads to is support for our kids. And regardless of what the metric is, we are in the kid business. And that is our fundamental charge. And I know in talking with many people, working with many people in the district, that this district is truly about trying to provide those opportunities for our students and giving them those opportunities to excel. And that's the one thing that I would want folks to take away, is that the work that happens each day in the schools is focused on that outcome. It's focused on, that individual student as much as it's focused on the metric. And our charge is balancing those two things and making sure that, that's what our standing is in our community, is that the community can feel confident that we are doing everything we possibly can to support and challenge our kids. And we've talked a lot about the implications and the outcomes of going through this pandemic, and I acknowledge all of them. But the other thing is that we have to push our kids. We have to challenge our kids, because they are coming up in this society. And what we talk about at the middle school level is, we want you to be the best representation of yourself when you go to the high school. Because if you don't go to the high school ready that first year and you fall behind, that's going to impact you in the path that you want to take. So we want our kids to be ready. So that would just be my take on it. It's that we are in the kid business. Our staff understand that. We love when our community is connected with our school. We look for those opportunities. We're looking more for them. And I would want the community to walk away saying that we understand the challenge and we're committed to overcoming the challenge for our students.
Yeah, I would echo that quite a bit at the high school level as well. I think, don't look at our students just based on numbers or based on that one fight that was on the news. There's so much amazing things happening and amazing students that are walking these halls, and come in, see what they're doing, come to a performance, come to a class that maybe you have expertise in. I've had a few people into my engineering room, and the kids love hearing about opportunities out in the community that they could get involved with, and support that. Don't just look at the numbers and don't just look at the headlines, because there's a lot of great stuff happening in all of these schools. And I see it here, and I see it when I drop my kids off or pick my kids up at Fairfax. I mean, all the kids at Fairfax, I feel like they're family. They see you and they, oh, hi, and they're just really friendly, and they've built a really nice community over there. And I don't have much involvement in the other elementary schools, but I'm sure that there's a similar feel. So it's a really nice community feel everywhere.
And I would add to that too, just continue to partner with your school. If you're a parent, a community member, just being a part of that school environment, I think is definitely critical, and will help push us forward. But then also providing feedback in a way of surveys. If there are surveys that are sent out to the community, participate in those surveys, participate in that feedback process. We have a lot of different events that happen around the schools, and we invite everyone to participate. So just continually participating, continually to have those partnerships, and then collaborating with the schools, I think is important.
I mean, smaller class sizes would be great. More teachers.
There are a lot of small class sizes in the district. I'll just say that. It's just so.
Okay, not mine.
There is so little. There is. I would say though that I would agree with all that. We and continue to do the things that you're already doing. We have many people who are volunteers through Reaching Heights. We have many people. I see Joan Spurl, who sends me probably once a week an opportunity, a professional development training, something for students to attend. Alan Wilkinson is an active community member, sent me like 3 scholarship opportunities this week. Like those kinds of things are actually really helpful because it helps us to, you know, pay attention to things or it gives us more opportunities. So, I mean, keep those things coming. I send that information out to teachers, I send it out to students, send it out to administrators, put it in our bulletin. Those kinds of things are really helpful. Come to our board meetings. At our board meetings, we started doing something called a monthly school spotlight, where a school presents something that they're doing, just to give you even more insight into things happening at the schools. If you can't attend, we also have those meetings taped as well. Sign up to be recipients of our newsletter so that you're aware of things that are happening. We have a pretty extensive newsletter that we send. You can choose if you want once a week, twice a week. We have a monthly newsletter, so you know, kind of staying informed too as well helps us in terms of you know, telling our story and making sure that our story is known. All of those pieces. And I have to say, I appreciate the community feedback. I appreciate the parent feedback, positive or negative, because when a community doesn't participate and isn't involved, that is a bad thing for the community and it's a bad thing for the schools. So it helps to hear, you know, great things you have questions on, things we need to work on, resource. Actually, all of it is helpful. And that is something that we really honor, encourage, and really rely on too as well. So it's great to have, you know, folks here tonight showing that commitment, you know, to our schools. Your presence here is an example of something to do.
I'm glad to hear about all the publicity. Used to be a day when you couldn't identify the schools. The signs identifying the schools were not facing the main streets. They were back on some secondary access. And so people didn't even, you know, they'd read some story that was good about the school and they had no idea that was what they were driving past every day. So yeah, it helps to engage the community, to let them know you're here.
We can actually see the front of this building.
This is beautiful, yeah. All right, you holding up okay? Can you take some questions from, okay. Given that many businesses are going virtual, at least partially, have you considered virtual training as a skill set for the future?
I can say that one thing that we're working on, kind of connected to that, is making sure that all of our students have a certification. So a component of that, well, kind of depends what you mean by virtual training. So the ability to know how to navigate tools in order to provide virtual training will be a component of like the kinds of certifications that will be out there that we're working on providing, you know, to our students. But I think also, if I'm understanding the question, just the ability to know how to operate within a virtual environment, you know, too as well. Now, I will say that I think our students definitely picked up a lot of skills in that way due to the pandemic.
Good high school skill?
That would be a great high school skill to have. I mean, yes, and I do think that a lot of them picked up on a lot of interesting skills and suggestions when they were on a computer trying to learn, you know, either, you know, turn your off or turn it on.
All right.
How to mute yourself?
How to mute yourself.
And unmute. Oh, the things we've learned. Has the pandemic made teacher retention and attracting new teachers more difficult?
We actually haven't seen that, and retention is one of the things that we track. So we actually been very blessed that we haven't had challenges attracting new teachers, and even with retention. So the numbers are similar to what they have been. Now, there are particular roles of teachers that have been more challenging than others. So for example, intervention specialists, that's been more difficult to staff, not only, you know, for us, but that's nationally, you know, and actually that has always been a difficult role. That's just been more challenging, you know now.
What does an intervention specialist do?
They work with students with disabilities.
Oh, okay.
So they have a caseload of students that they support, and they also teach as well, typically.
Okay. I assume that this community is not having as much negative pressure from outside as some communities that we see in the news.
In terms of like what to teach?
Yeah. Oh, you are? Oh,
In Cleveland University? No, we have not been targeted for that kind of feedback. And interestingly, there are organizations that do target districts. In fact, there's like a website that has like a rating for districts, and you know, the more kind of progressive you are, the redder your score is. And I believe we're on there, but you know, no, we haven't received. I think that would be an interesting dynamic in our district and community should we become the target of kind of that kind of pressure to tell people what to teach and how to teach, and you know, which students to honor and support. Yeah, so we don't have that.
okay.
You wouldn't see the retention of teachers that we have if that were the case, I think.
Right, yeah, I would think. As it became evident that COVID was mostly airborne and that open air / high ventilation could reduce transmission, did you consider moving classrooms to outdoors or to highly ventilated spaces?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, we did, and in the spring and summer there were schools and classrooms that were doing that. We also did look at all the research around, you know, what needed to be in place in our schools in order to have lots of ventilation, and aligned our heating and cooling systems, you know, to that. So just making sure that there's a particular percentage of outside air that was always, you know, circulating too as well. Yeah,
I will say when we were hybrid-ish, I think, I spent most of my lunches outside, right out in the little courtyard, and the choir would come out and do practice outside because they could take their masks off. And it was great. I got a little serenade. So yes, some of that happened. And I know they went to like parking lots when they were virtual, but do perform, like sitting together.
And I can just, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I can just speak from our school experience. If there was a circumstance where there was a concern about error or just the way that classroom was configured, that our business services was very responsive to additional measures and those kinds of things. So we worked with staff that were concerned about that, whether it was a pre-existing condition or something along those lines. So they were very responsive to that. And we were fortunate because we have a somewhat renovated new building. So, you know, our systems were up to speed.
That helps.
That helps.
Kindergarten outside?
Oh, I was joking. Yes, I did try several times, and it did not go particularly.
Oh dear.
I mean, they go outside to play. So trying to get them on the playground to listen to me while the dogs are walking, and the horns are honking, and the birds are singing, it doesn't go great. The wind is blowing the papers away.
Yeah.
Not in Cleveland. And then it's cold or it's rainy. So I think, I mean, I know of like kids who go to like fully outdoor school, they got their snow pants on and they're just outside doing life. But yeah, it didn't go great. I had all these ideas. And your voice, I mean, like, and I'm sure the neighbors were like, what is going on over there? It is fun though to see, I think sometimes thinking back to that question about the community, like sometimes seeing people walking by when we're outside, not just outside at recess, but the other day I took the kids out because the school counselor was talking to them about shared games, and of course they're like, a board game. I said, well, you can't play a board game with 10 kids. What can you do with lots of kids? And so she was asking them for ideas, and they were like, they just couldn't think of any. So we went outside to learn like red light, green light, or what time is it, Mr. Fox, and this and that. And it was just a random time of the day where the kids are not usually outside. And it was cool to see like people walking by, smiling and excited and happy to see kids being kids and, you know, an adult interaction with them positively. And I think that would be something like, that would be nice for people in the community to see more of. It's just like, what is it that is happening in the schools and the people who are there who really truly care about them and we want the best things for them.
Okay. It's not about COVID, but more about changing social circumstances. Can you speak about food distribution efforts and concerns regarding changes, reductions in benefits that just took effect, and how that's impacting the kids who are on the breakfast and lunch programs?
Well, there was a year, I know we presented this, it was like $1 million, no, 1 million meals, 1 million meals. We have some food distribution champions here amongst us, I'd say. So Nancy Pepper was in the audience, and she and many volunteers led efforts during COVID to provide boxes of food. We had different organizations that were donating the food, and this was not only just for our students, but the community, so we led multiple efforts to distribute food. It was one year, it was like every
Thursday.
Yeah, right? And then, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, you see those changes happening. Now, our students all, because we are a CEP district, all of our students get free and reduced lunch, so we're not going to have like the changes that other districts are likely to have. But in terms of, you know, things like changes in SNAP benefits, like all those pieces are going to have impact on families, right? So that's like the pieces that aren't school-based, but we know impact, you know, students' experience that does have an effect in the classroom and on their learning. Yeah.
And so our social workers will work really hard to continue to provide resources and look for additional resources to support that need, working with various food banks, making sure that we at least can provide what we can provide in schools, and then referring families to those outside agencies to be able to get that support.
That's good to know. Would the district's ability to address challenges have been different if it hadn't lost $26 million in funding to vouchers?
I'm glad it's one of cry. Yes. You know, I will say yes, but I'm actually gonna, well, I'll say this. So things like consistently smaller class sizes wouldn't be a challenge. I mean, you know, it's like you know, you're trying to choose, like, where do you make those adjustments, right? When you have a limited pool of resources due, you know, due to vouchers and the politics of that. But, you know, the supports, I mean, many things, right? Like the fact that we had to ask our community for additional funds for the levy. We wouldn't have had to do that had we received that money. But there are many things, many opportunities that we would have provided for our students. You know, much better buildings for the elementary schools, for example. You know, the fact that we haven't had those funds has meant that we've been challenged to really provide the quality facilities at our elementary schools, and are really kind of like patching things up at this point with duct tape, so that our students can have you know, a safe academic experience. You know, when I think about additional supports at the middle school level and the needs, right? What's going to happen when the ESSER funds aren't there? The kinds of structures that we have in place, we've needed in place, right? So yes, it has definitely hurt our students, it's hurt our families, and it's hurt the community. I don't know if you guys are that.
Cassie, we do have one question specifically to you, and it's not my question.
Okay.
Where is the playground that you mentioned? Yeah.
It's on Chester, and like, it's right next to the Huff neighborhood. So it's awesome. You can't miss it if you're just going down Chester.
East 55th.
Yeah, there we go.
It's no
55th.
further down Ireland School.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a manufacturing like consortium. It's awesome. It's a really cool place.
It's a group that knows their playgrounds. Or their magnet schools, one or the other. All right, last question. Yeah. It's an edited question. Do you feel that what teachers and staff have learned through the pandemic and post-pandemic will be applicable when the next public health crisis comes?
Today, our school has these morning announcements, and today's announcement was talking about the Spanish flu in 1918, and so they talked about how kids have to quarantine and this and that, and so I was talking to kindergartners about this because sometimes I go into that with them, and I said, do you remember like when you had to wear your mask and, we couldn't be around each other as much, and it was interesting to see them like flash back to that. But it's interesting how like, we go in waves and, we have these things and then we figure out what to do, and then it becomes like a new normal. It's not something that we've done in the past, but it's this new normal. And so I think that, again, time will tell. Like, I think we have some pieces of what we could put in place if something like that did happen again, or I don't think we'll be as shocked next time. Like, that's not what's gonna be, because I remember thinking that too, like, the school's not gonna shut down, no way. And then it did for 2 years, and so I think that I definitely, my mindset is like, anything is possible with that.
I would agree with that. I would just think back to, what do we learn how to do? Well, we learned how to bring in a third and a third and a third of the kids and still have them go through, their classes, right? We've learned how to have some kids virtual and some kids not virtual in a hybrid model. We've learned how to navigate students through lunch.
I don't think I ever fully learned how to do that. Do the hybrid and in class, online. I'm still working on that.
Yeah, I'm referring to, we had kids coming in on different schedules. And so, you had kids coming in, and did you think that could be managed, until you go through it? And we probably learned what you can't do successfully. So I do feel like we would be very much prepared for something like this going forward. I hope we don't have to have that, but I do, this experience has taught us a great deal about not only the challenges that our families face and our students face, but also what we can do in response to it and how we can try to still create a good learning environment for them despite those challenges. I feel like we're in a better place now than we were in 2019.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, anything you do twice has got to be better, right? But no, I mean, we definitely learned a lot about what kind of works, what definitely doesn't work. So I think as long as the superintendent and administrators and the teachers can be collaborative, if something were to come up and we were to really be able to say, okay, this is what works, this really didn't work, this was really hard, I think we're at least in a better place there if people are willing to really come together and talk about that.
And I think part of being well prepared is having the capacity to be able to do something. So understanding that we have the capacity and now the confidence, because we were able to change things on the fly. We were able to, switch gears, or if something wasn't working, putting up other avenues if we needed to provide supports to families, such as connections to Wi-Fi. How can we do this? How can we work collaboratively together? So just knowing that now we can do this, so whatever's kind of thrown our way, we can figure it out together and be somewhat successful. I think that that's important, not necessarily the specifics of the preparedness, but just understanding that we have the capacity to do whatever it takes in order to make sure that we get things done.
Yeah, I think this question kind of reminds me of like, so what are the lessons learned that we would take into another crisis? One, you cannot communication is key. Communicate, 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 and communicate some more, and communicate some more, and communicate some more, and then communicate some more. In most things.
And make it a two-way street.
Right.
Communication has to go back.
Well, and that was going to connect with the second piece, which is the collaborative. You know, we did lots of collaboration in deciding kind of like how we were going to deal with the pandemic. So, you know, committee of you know, people in different roles from all across the district. And then as we were, kind of depending upon like what element we were working on. It's like working with teachers for the teaching part, you know, working with, you know, staff, you know, different roles on those parts, but keeping that collaboration going, because you know, the people who are on the ground doing the work every day really understand what's working, what's not working, and what's needed. And you have to have like, you know, and then, you know, multiple voices from those different roles too. And then I think what I learned is that, you know, if you go into a virtual environment, you can't do everything. You gotta focus on like, what are the core things, you know, to get done. If I had to do over again, we probably just have like a really strong focus on literacy and math. And I'm just saying this now, kind of looking at what we're struggling with now, just to keep it targeted and focused for students. Because now there are things that kids have to catch up on, and it's hard to do it there. I think it's possible to do virtual learning really, really well, actually. Like we see some, you know, anecdotes of districts across the country who went fully virtual and didn't miss a beat in terms of their academic performance, but that takes lots of coordination. So I think in order to do that, I think we will be better prepared for that if we had to do something like that again. But, you know, the structures have to be really clear. And, you know, as a superintendent, I have to continue to really monitor everything in the district to see what's working that we want to replicate, what's not working that we want to throw away. You know, like those kinds of just basic strategic actions. But yeah, to me, I think the biggest lesson that we all learned is how you can't do anything in a country without teachers. You can't. The world stopped. And I think we also learned, and certainly parents learned, what teaching really is, like what that experience is, and developed a better understanding of that to make them even better partners, you know, with teachers and administrators in schools too.
And then there's the question of what are we going to do with our fashionable face masks, and how long do we carry one in our purse going forward? Might be the new thing. All right, I thank you very much for coming out and speaking to us this evening. This has been very interesting and informative. That concludes our forum.